Coming up on this episode of the Upper One Podcast, continuing the series with the pod decks, we talk about truck driving in America. Same cards, same questions, different subject. Stay tuned.
And now podcasting from the great state of Alaska, this is the Upper One Podcast.
Hey y'all, welcome back to this 24th episode of the Upper One Podcast. Truck driving in America. How many of us traveled across the country in some form or another, traveling miles down the highway to get to a destination, whether it be camping, family reunions, moving? I used to do it, trying to get a truck driver to honk at you. I read something last year during the pandemic that truck drivers missed that, trying to get them to honk the horn. I do remember a lot of times they wouldn't do it. Anyhow, let's get to a little bit of history. Before the invention of automobiles, freight was moved by train or horse-drawn vehicle. In World War I, the military was the first to extensively use trucks. Hours of service laws were implemented as early as the 1930s. In the 50s and 60s, truck driving was accelerated by the construction of the interstate highway system. By the 60s and 70s, there were major hit songs about the trucking industry. Truck driving dominates the freight industry in the latter 20th century. Backing up a little, in the 19th century, freight was transported by train into centralized areas and then distributed by horse-drawn transport. The few trucks that were in existence were more for novelties or only used as advertisement and not utility space. Back then, most trucks had electric motors and had a limited range along with smaller load capacities and were only used for short haul routes. In the 20th century, internal combustion gas engines allowed for gain in popularity. 1913, the first weight limits were introduced. In 1914, almost 100,000 trucks were on American roads. Solid tires, poor rural roads, maximum speeds of 15 miles an hour limited the use of trucks in urban areas. In 1933, as part of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, the merger of American Highway Freight Association and the Federated Trucking Association of America became the American Trucking Association. In 1935, Congress passed the Motor Carrier Act, which authorized the Interstate Commerce Commission. In 1977, the third highest grossing movie was Smokey and the Bandit, only behind Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The Motor Carrier Act of 1980 partially deregulated the trucking industry. That led to dramatic increases of the number of trucking companies in operation. The trucking workforce was deunionized. The deregulation led to decreased costs to consumers. The Surface Transportation Assistance Act of 1982 established federal minimum for weight limits. It also standardized size and weight limits across the country for traffic on the interstate highways. In 2006, there were 26 million trucks on America's roads, hauling over 10 billion short tons, or the equivalent of 9.1 billion long tons of freight, representing 70% of the total volume of freight. OSHA has determined that 70% of fatal automobile tractor-trailer accidents were the result of unsafe actions of automobile drivers. That's in quotations, unsafe actions of automobile drivers. In 2007, Women in Trucking Association was founded by Ellen Voy. In 2009, the book Trucking Country, The Road to America's Walmart Economy by Shane Hamilton explores the history and developments that helped the big box stores dominate the U.S. economy. Coming up after the music, I will get into the second segment, frequently asked questions and rookie mistakes. One of the first questions is, how long does it take to become a truck driver? Well, first of all, you got to get your CDL. If you go through a full-time training program, it could take you up to 7 weeks on average. For me, I had already been driving 28-foot box trucks at Sears that were not commercial vehicles just because of their gross vehicle weight rating. So I already had some experience, and the only thing I needed to do was learn how to drive synchronized transmissions, which really isn't that hard once you get into it. So it all depends. To me, it all depends on if you've got the mindset of learning how to work basically on the job training, getting in a truck, is on the job training. Another question is, what is OTR? Well, OTR stands for over the road. Usually you see those being long trucks going across the highway. Those are over the road truckers. There's a lot to that. You know, it takes you away from your family, long days on the road. And I will get into that a little bit more on some of these questions. Are there other qualifications to become a truck driver? Well, the short answer is no. You just have to have the ability to drive safe and pass a DOT medical examination. If you're going to go all out, you have to just pass tests for endorsements. I just recently got my doubles and triples endorsement. I don't know when it started, but you know, you could just get that endorsement and just start driving. Well, now you have to do LCV training, which is called long combination vehicle training. Me being union, I have to do that through the union. There are other requirements for that training as well. Do you make good money? Well, the Indeed has ratings that say 51% of truck drivers believe their salary is enough for the cost of living in their area. Other short and long answers you can get into is costs on what it takes to become an owner-operator, owning your own business. And then there's also the other end of it is, you know, sometimes you won't make a whole lot of money. I think on average it's about 50 grand a year. Is it hard to become a truck driver? Well, as I said just a few minutes ago, what does it take to become a truck driver? Yes, it is kind of hard. It takes a different mindset to learn how to drive a longer truck, a bigger truck, knowing where your blind spots are, keeping an eye on what's around you, knowing your surroundings, shifting gears, being able to grab a gear if you need to make an emergency. You know, if somebody pulls in front of you and slams on the brakes at a stoplight, you'd be able to stop, slow the truck down. So it is kind of hard, but at the same time, you know, if you got that mindset, it's gravy. What are the pros and cons of being a truck driver? Well, I said some of that with the over the road, you know, being away from home, being away from your family if you're a family person, and depending on what kind of job you get. If you're over the road trucker, you know you're going to be gone for a while. But if you're local like me, I work specifically locally in Anchorage, and I'm always home at night. One of the other cool things about being over the road trucker, which I did back in 2007, was you get to see the country on somebody else's dime. So if you're you're going to go by a certain area, geographic location, like in my case, I got to cross the Mississippi River for the first time in a rubber tire vehicle. And then on that same trip, I was able to go to a few other states that I'd never been to. And I also got to go see Graceland. So, you know, basically you do that on somebody else's dime as long as you have, you know, a little bit of leeway or freedom. Like with me, I had to drop a trailer because it needed to be serviced. They let me bobtail, which means just a tractor, just a truck part. I pulled over to the parking lot right across from Graceland. I got to walk up to the gate, got to peek over. You know, they were already closed, but so, you know, you get to see a lot of basically vacation stuff to a certain point on somebody else's dime. How much does it cost to obtain a CDL? Well, your licenses and your medical cards and stuff like that are all going to cost something depending on the state. I don't know if it's a set fee or not, especially with the real ID that we're having to get. If you go to a training course, on average, it's $1,000 to $8,000 for training. Like I said earlier, how long does it take? Up to 7 weeks. And they put you through extensive training. They make sure you're doing your pre-trip inspections correctly. Part of that too is most training courses have certified instructors that sign off on your license. So basically they put you through the driving test. And then all you have to do is go to the DMV to get your license. So how often do truck drivers come home? Over-the-road truck drivers, on average, they come home every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on their job and their hours of service. There's a lot to the hours of service, and I'll get to that here right now. What are hours of service and what are the regs? Well, hours of service regulate how much time you can be on duty and how much of that on-duty time is allowed to be driving. Depending on your state and your location, most of the lower 48, I don't know about Hawaii, but the lower 48, the continental 48 states, you can either work 60 hours in a 7-day period or 70 hours in an 8-day period. Of that, you can work 14 consecutive hours on duty, which of that 14 hours, 11 can be driving. Or if you're carrying passengers, you can have 15 consecutive hours on duty, and only 10 of that 15 hours can be driving. Once you're off for the day, you have to take 10 consecutive off-duty hours before reporting for your next shift. But there are special provisions for that. I haven't had to fall under that quite yet because they didn't have this implemented back then, but you can split that 10 hours up. So you're not allowed to drive more than 8 hours without taking a 30-minute break. Well, you can take a 2-hour nap and then get back up and drive. And then once you end your shift for that day, then you can do your 8 hours. So that's splitting the 10 hours off. There are also other special provisions for, like I just said, the sleeper berth and adverse driving conditions. So if you're getting to the end of your drivable hours on duty and you're not anywhere close to a safe zone and there's inclement weather or other factors, that will allow you to push that envelope of your hours of service driving hours. There are short haul exceptions. Like for me, on short haul exceptions, it gives you a 150 air mile radius as to what you can and can't do, how you have to log. Up here in Alaska, the hours of service are 80 hours in 8 days with a 20-hour work shift per day, and of that 20 hours, 15 hours can be driving. Now, another provision that I didn't mention was, let's say for me, that's the reason why we have a 20-hour on-duty day and 15 hours driving is because, we are the largest state. It takes 6 hours for me to get to Fairbanks, and then from Fairbanks, it is another haul. For most of these truck drivers, if you've seen ice road truckers, it takes a while to get up to Deadhorse. So, then there's not a whole lot of, really the only hub between Fairbanks and Deadhorse is Coldfoot. So basically, a lot of guys will start here in Anchorage. They'll drive to Coldfoot in one day in their drivable hours. They will stay the night. They will run to Deadhorse, offload, and then come back to Coldfoot. And that takes another one shift, and then Coldfoot down to Anchorage. Sometimes, things happen. They might stop in Fairbanks or whatever to pick up another part of the load or whatever. But, usually from Anchorage, it could take you 3 days before you're back home if you go to Deadhorse. So what I was getting at is when you go up on the oil field, basically your logbook goes out the window. Once you're on the oil field, you can stop your hours and go off duty, and you can be up there and still be working past your 20-hour shift. But as long as you're on the oil field, you can be off duty and it doesn't count towards your 20 hours or your 15 drivable hours. On to rookie mistakes. As a human, there's egos. And I'll tell a story about this here in a second, but the first one is being too confident. All these rookies, they get out here and they think they're the best drivers. It's always someone else's fault when something goes wrong out on the road or with something. It's always somebody else's fault. These rookies need to know that becoming a professional driver takes a lot of experience, and they need to check that ego at the door. I was there. I drove those 28-foot trucks at Sears that weren't commercial. I wanted to get up and go. My first real commercial driving job up here was when I got my CDL. It was hauling fuel, and then a few years after that I was hauling snow for a construction company, and then then it rolled over into the summer hauling dirt. And I had a bunch of the bigger trucks. Well, at the time I only had my Class B. I had some of the Class A drivers pull me aside and say, "Hey, we could tell you're going to be a good driver, but you need to slow down." So so I was there. Rookies have a lot to learn. That's part of being too confident. Not following safety protocols is also another mistake. Keeping safe is the number one priority, and once you're safe, you're going to keep your load safe. You rush your safety, you put others' safety in jeopardy. So, if you're in a hurry, you're not taking care of yourself, you're not taking care of your load, something happens with that load, you put somebody else in jeopardy. So safety is a big one. Taking care of themselves, you get out over the road, your health. A lot of guys, that are on the road a long time, when it falls under those long hours that they're driving, their mental health goes away. Their mind goes elsewhere. They don't manage their money very well. And this is where the hours of service comes back in is, they don't manage their sleeping habits very well. While I'm on the topic of that, taking care of themselves and the sleep, I don't remember when it was, but the DOT regulates sleep apnea. So the majority of truck driving accidents that have occurred that were the driver's fault, they were caused because the driver has fallen asleep. If you know anything about sleep apnea, you're not getting enough sleep. You're not getting into the correct sleep when you do sleep, and that causes you to be tired during the day. I've done it. This is July. I've been on a sleep apnea machine since January, and I got to tell you, I fought it for a long time because I worked in that industry. I recommend everybody that has problems, if you feel tired, you feel draggy during the day, feel like you want to take a nap, whether you're overweight or not, whether, get a sleep test. Just make sure, because your body will benefit from it, whether you're big like me or not. Moving on, being too proud. Rookies are afraid to ask for help. You might think that with today's day and age, people get bullied and stuff. You may think that an experienced driver might poke fun at you or not offer help to you, but this is our industry, in my opinion, and I do it this way. If somebody asks me for help, I'm not going to be afraid to offer my experience or offer some sort of help, or even help them, lend a hand with them if they need help with something. Having high expectations. Life on the road isn't as easy as rookies think it will be. They think it's just going to be a breeze. It's tough. There's some tough work depending on your toss and chain, hauling flatbed stuff. Being disorganized, not having the necessary paperwork, not correctly filling out your logs. You pull up to a scale and they pull you over to inspect you. It's happened to me. You've got to correctly fill out your logs. If within 15 minutes of you being there, if it's not within 15 minutes correct, they're going to dock you. If you're an owner operator or you work for a company that requires receipts, not keeping those organized, in the end, all of that will save them time and money. Well, that's it for this segment. I will be back right after the music with truck driving myths. And there's some good ones. Some you're not even going to believe. All right, third and final segment of Trucking in America. Here's some myths that I don't know if some of you are going to even believe that are myths. The first one is most people don't care about truckers. Well, without truckers, America stops. You don't want to care about truckers. Just think about how your stuff's getting to the store, getting on the shelves. During the pandemic, guess what was gone? We were delivering it. Truck drivers are delivering toilet paper. Another myth is that truck drivers are male. Well, that's in fact false. There are over 200,000 long-haul women truckers. In fact, women are just as capable, confident, and able-bodied as men to be truck drivers. This one's a good one. Truck drivers never shower. Most interstate highway systems, within a certain distance, you're going to find big, full truck stops with all the amenities. They will be able to pull in, park their truck. They even have, like back in the day, you go to the drive-in movie theaters and they have their little speaker box. You just roll your window down, pull that speaker in. Well, there's some similar things at truck stops where if it's wintertime, you put this little fan on your window and it'll blow warm air. That way you don't have to keep your motor running. In the summertime, in most warmer weather states, that fan will blow cool air in, that you don't have to keep your truck running and waste fuel. So they never have to look for home conveniences because most interstate systems have several truck stops that have full amenities, restaurants, showers. Some of them even have gyms with some, limited workout equipment. Convenience stores, where you can grab snacks and stuff like that. So that one's not true. Truckers are irresponsible. Actually, truckers are extensively trained and able to handle the road. Truck drivers take safety very seriously. On top of safety, one of the things, and I've got a sticker on my mixer truck that I got from one of the way stations up here. They were having a appreciation day. It's a black sticker. It's got an 800 number on it. It's Truckers Against Trafficking. So TAT, Truckers Against Trafficking. Especially this last year, and I'm not getting political, but since around the election and leading up to the election, one of the big things has been human trafficking across this country. So like I said, we take safety very seriously, along with keeping an eye out for human trafficking. I've got the sticker with the 800 number to call if you suspect stuff. Another myth is that truck drivers cause a lot of accidents. Actually, truck drivers are 3 times less likely to have an accident than normal vehicles. The majority of accidents occur due to being in blind spots or abruptly braking in front of them. As I said earlier, when OSHA stated that 71% of all accidents are caused by normal vehicles. Well, in my opinion, to drive a car, you need to know how to operate around big trucks, tractor trailers, doubles, triples. You need to know what that driver's think. You need to know where his blind spots are, how long it takes for him to brake. If the trucker has a load, it's easier for him to stop with a full load than it is an empty load. If you pull up to a stoplight and, I got room, that line's shorter and cut right in front of that truck driver, you just cut his distance in more than half to his stopping distance. Just like we have to watch out for motorcycles, I think four-wheeler cars, normal vehicles, need to watch out for truck drivers because 71% of those accidents are caused by normal vehicles, not truck drivers. Another myth is we aren't cultured or knowledgeable. over-the-road truck drivers drive all over the country and see just about everything along with experiencing things and meeting great people. So like I said earlier, you can go on vacation on somebody else's dime if you're an over-the-road truck driver, if that's the way you look at it. Another myth is that truck drivers are loners. Actually, truck driving is a very social profession. We talked about Smokey the Bandit earlier. You know, how did they communicate? How did the Bandit and the Snowman communicate? Well, they communicated by CB. Everybody watched the Dukes of Hazzard. You know, there was Lost Sheep, which was Bo and Luke, and Daisy. There was Shepherd, which was Uncle Jesse. There was Crazy Cooter. Breaker one, maybe crazy, but I ain't dumb. Crazy Cooter coming at you. Well, guess what? All truck drivers have some form of radio. A lot of the truckers up here have a CB radio, and they have a ham radio or a UHF VHF radio that has the higher frequencies, and they could talk longer because of the traveling up to the North Slope. So truck driving is not a lonely profession. Another myth is that truck drivers are always sitting. They're only sitting while they're driving. When you get to a stop, you're either loading or unloading, and then if they get to the truck stops, they always stay fairly active. You know, yeah, there are some that have the stereotype that truck drivers are big and overweight. You know, that's because, just like a rookie, they're not taking care of themselves in a fairly active manner. Another myth is that drivers aren't professional. In fact, drivers take their jobs very seriously. We talked about hours of service. When a trucker takes his mandatory time off before his next shift, you know, we still got to set our alarms. We still got to get up for work because each load has a deadline. Some of the most reliable and committed people you ever meet will be a truck driver. And lastly, and this is the big one, this is one that I think people do not know and they are going to be surprised at. This is a myth. A lot of people, most people, I don't know the percentages, think that you cannot carry a firearm in a commercial vehicle. Well, that is not true. There is no federal law prohibiting drivers from carrying as long as they adhere to local and state laws. Now, the carrier you work for, the company you work for may prohibit it, but as of right now, there are no laws prohibiting a truck driver to carry a gun. Well, I hope this has been a little informative and educating on the truck driving industry in America. With that being said, I'd like to close out the show by thanking everybody again. Thank you so much for listening and being here with me. Please like and share these episodes on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Pass it on. Try to get me some more listeners. Try to get me somebody that wants to know about Alaska so that I could let them know. I could do an episode. Email upper_1_podcast@yahoo.com.